Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and this is going to be my last video on the Shroud of Turin. And I hear the faint applause. But this is a perfect way to conclude it. Last September I put out a video where it seemed the church was trying to put out a cover story on who was actually on the Shroud of Turin. They knew about it all along, and they put out some ridiculous cover stories trying to cover up this original story that involved into the Jesus story in the New Testament. And in my last video, I put out a video finding the man who became Jesus, and I identified a man by the name of Simon Bar Giora, and he led the final Jewish revolt against Rome at this time. That must have been just apocalyptic to these people living around Jerusalem at this time. And I have talked about how it connects to the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls and their writing. It was a very in-depth, esoteric writing. They talked about the sons of light versus the sons of darkness, and this was clearly a reference of their battle with Rome. But Simon Bar Giora, he is the man that was crucified. And let's take a look at the Bible. What does that say about the crucifixion? Now let's start reading in verse 31 here. And after that they had mocked him, they took the robe off from him and put his own raiment on and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were to come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of the skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall. And when they had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots. So who does it say was actually crucified? Simon was compelled to bear the cross. They led him to Golgotha, gave him vinegar, and then they crucified him. So if you read this, it sounds like the guy who was crucified was Simon. I will leave that link below so you can read that for yourself. Now, you would say, well, that's just the way you read that. You're reading it wrong. We all know Jesus was crucified. Well, maybe that Jesus crucifixion story. Let's see what Irenaeus, a church father, has to say about it in the 2nd century. What does he have to say about the Simon of Cyrene? It says this, from Irenaeus, written in the 2nd century, the period where this first text was written, and before the final verses were finalized. What does Irenaeus have to say about the crucifixion and Simon? He says this in the 2nd century. Christ seemed to be a man who performed miracles. It was not, however, Christ who suffered, but Simon of Cyrene, who was constrained to the cross and was mistakenly crucified in Christ's stead. Simon, having received Jesus' form, Jesus returned Simon's and stood by and laughed. Simon was crucified and Jesus returned to the Father. That is absolutely freaking amazing. A church father says it was Simon who actually was crucified. That is a church father around 1900 years ago, saying that it was Simon who was crucified because Jesus was so miraculous that he could change forms with Simon. So to save himself, Jesus had Simon change into his form. What the heck am I reading? Are you serious? The whole conspiracy just unraveled right there. Now, to find out if Simon Bar Giora was the right guy, I wanted to go to somebody who really knew what they were talking about. I found this article by a Cecil Roth. He was the eminent Oxford historian on Jewish history, and he wrote on the Jewish revolt against Rome. And what I wanted to know mainly is Bar Giora. What does Bar Giora of Simon Bar Giora tell us? Well, those weren't last names that told you. It was a description of who people were, maybe who they were born of. But Bar Giora means the son of a convert the son of a recent convert, and that fits perfectly in with the Abgar and Queen Helena story. So that really ties Simon to Edessa, Turkey, where the holy image actually was. And this was a fascinating read. I will leave the link below. But it talks about Simon, how his wife, and he was really a masterful leader, military leader, and he was revered, and he actually was considered a savior in this final time before the temple was sacked in Jerusalem. And his wife was abducted, and that fits perfectly to the Simon Magus story, where Simon runs around with a Helena, and there's a strange story about her getting detained. That fits perfectly, but this was just a fascinating article, and it talks about the atmosphere of this final apocalyptic battle. Simon takes over the temple, he inflicts defeats on Rome, and finally, I think Vespasian marches in there, and it's really an epic apocalyptic battle between a mighty ruler of the East and the mighty ruler of the Roman Empire, military leader, and it's a final conflict, and that is what all historical texts are written off of. Spiritual tales are spun off of that, and this is the exact time and place. And Simon Bar-Giora, by historians, has said he was the example that the Romans set by crucifying him to all Jewish people around Jerusalem, that this was not going to happen again. Simon Bar-Giora was the original Jesus, or the guy who became Jesus in the New Testament, and there was no way on earth the Roman writers of the Bible were going to let this true history come out. And after he was crucified, something happened. His image appeared on the shroud, and I think if real investigative research was done on the shroud, an explanation would come forward, but the shroud literally has only been researched in proper fashion for just hours in its whole 2,000-year history. It's been put away, locked away. You are lucky just to be able to see it. Something happened, and this spawned a miracle, a religion that evolved into Christianity. But this original story, it came from Edessa, Turkey, and even more remarkable than that verse from Irenaeus saying it was Simon who actually got crucified. Let me show you this. This is artwork, and this is of the guy who was on the Shroud of Turin, and this comes from the original religion. Remember, the Hymn of the Pearl, I said, was all about the Shroud of Turin, and this original, whoever he was, that evolved into Jesus. Well, here he is, and here is a pearl with the light, the radiance coming off of it. This was your final stage of life. You were wrapped up in a shroud symbolized by the pearl shell and was opened. You were enlightened. The third baptism, you were venerated in an image. This is the Shroud of Turin, the Hymn of the Pearl. I will leave a link for that video. But this religion was it was much different. It was like a primordial Adam. Danny Wilton goes into this much better than I do, but it was an original religion of creation, thought, mind, consciousness, had much more Egyptian flavor to it. And I'm sure the people who were putting together the Bible really didn't want that to come forward. And the Adam and Eve story is written a little differently, and the shroud was the focal point of that teaching. It was a divinity. It was a ray of light within everybody that exists before and after. And here you see Simon with a serpent wrapped up among his pillar, and a ladder going up to that, and there's a purpose for that. But later in Christianity, there was a symbol of Jesus on the cross. Well, this was the original symbol. This is Simon with the pearl, symbolizing like a virgin birth, and the shroud and the pearl being enclosed in something that is perfect symbolism for the Shroud of Turin. Once again, this is the symbolic artwork of the man on the shroud. and I find that absolutely fascinating. Now, the shroud was rediscovered in the year 544, I believe, in a pillar above the west gate of Edessa, Turkey. And to have the shroud, I mean, people were definitely fearful that the Roman army was going to, appear at any time and take it away. And it was really guarded with the utmost secrecy and handled with the utmost care. And in fact, you were lucky to see it. But this is the art of what they call the Simeon stylites of around the 6th century. And when the shroud was rediscovered, I believe the original story was unveiled to these people, and they wrote about it in secretive forms. They wrote about it in present-day fashion, but this was clearly a reference to Simon, who was called Simon Magus by biblical authors, and Simon Bar Giora by Jewish historians. He led the Jewish revolt, and his appearance came on the shroud. The shroud was kept in a pillar above the west gate in Edessa, Turkey, and this is clearly what this represents. You remember in my video, or in a few of my videos, I said the shroud was always kept in a wooden box, and here is Simon sitting on a wooden box in a pillar, which very easily could be the western gate of the city of Edessa here. And the gate was called the Gate of the Cherubim. Here he is, angel right by. That is no coincidence. This is how Simon is depicted, the person who became Jesus in the New Testament. And how do I know this is the man on the shroud? Well, everything fits. The gate name, sitting on the box that contained the shroud. And this is a symbol of the third baptism of life, right here. The circle above his head. And that is when you are revealed in a generated image, when the secret, this fire, this spark of light, this divinity that's present in everybody before and after they are born is revealed. And at the bottom of the painting is the first step in life. Obviously an infant wrapped in a shroud. That is the man on the shroud right here, folks. Now, not only did I find some original artwork of Simon, this is, I believe, an original church. This is a church of St. Simon. People say this is one of the oldest churches, period. It is in Syria. I'll leave a link below. And the religion of this original group that eventually became Christianity in the New Testament after many changes and redactions, they were called Mandeans. And I think there are certain things that fit perfectly in with the Mandeans, being this original group from Edessa, Turkey, and the keepers of the shroud. And many things fit, but one thing in particular, they are written about as they are the people of immunity and of the original book. And the keepers of the shroud made deals with people that they were never to be attacked when possession of the shroud changed. They had perpetual immunity, and they were people of the original book, and that's exactly what people say about the Mandeans. So I will leave a couple links below for that. I just wanted to mention that. And the original name was the Mandean. The original shroud's name was the Mandean, the image of Edessa, and I don't think that is a coincidence. And I just wanted to throw this in there. This comes from Marco Polo on his visits to Persia in about 1298. This is entitled Christ and the Persian Magi. And this explains why the Magi visited Christ in the biblical tale at his birth. But what it shows, this is the story of Simon, and the Magi visited Simon at his third baptism when he was revealed in an image. It says, when these Magi were presented to Christ, the youngest of the three adored him at first, and it appeared to him that Christ was of his stature and age. That's because they were looking at an image. They were looking at the Shroud of Turin. And remember Simon, when he was discredited by the authors of the Bible, he was called Simon Magus, the Magi. Just wanted to throw that in there. Now, I think I've taken this just about as far as I can possibly take it. I want to go on to other subjects, but this fits perfectly. What my channel wants to do is bring out lost history. People have gone down many roads on the Shroud, tried to prove it was Jesus, tried to prove it was hoax. really concentrating, how was this thing actually made, instead of getting to the true story of the Shroud. And that's what I have attempted to do for you people. And I think the research on the true history of the Shroud has been pretty bad, pretty terrible. But I just wanted to have no bias. Now, I am not a church basher. I have seen good things the church has done, especially when my dad's wife passed away a few years ago. He was really helped by the church, so I don't want to bash the church. I have seen problems with the church and the business of the church and how religion has led to wars that has led to the death of millions of people. I'm sure everybody has a problem with that or an issue with that. But I wanted to put all of the spiritual aspects, everything out of the way, and just get to the true history of this 2,000-year-old object. And what I found, it's absolutely amazed me. Simon Bar Giora, he is referred to. He is referred to as Simon Magus. It was totally rewritten, and a Jesus figure was put in. And the religion of Simon, what do they say about Jesus? They say, in the best interpretation, the Jesus story is a Roman fairy tale. Now, Simon Bar Giora, he was crucified as an example to the people around Judea at the time of the revolt. And in later stories, there is ridiculous things written about him. In one story, it says he revealed himself in an image in the linen to the Romans, and it scared them. And in another story, it says he emerged when the captors were after him, and he hid inside of a linen and tried to scare the Roman soldiers. The stuff is so ridiculous. If you look at this from the minds of the people who were writing it and how they were trying to discredit Simon Magus, the whole story becomes perfectly clear. Simon Bar Giora, in one tale, is said to have gone to Rome and plunged to his death. The Simon Magus character, how does he die in one version? Well, here is Jack Palance as Simon Magus, and Simon Bar Giora plunges to his death in Rome. And in a ridiculous tale, how does Simon Magus die? Well, here is Jack Palance, and how does he die? He plunges to his death in Rome. He didn't fly. I think I have brought you enough. I have given you the pieces to this puzzle, where if you want to investigate this for yourself, please do so. The Romans rewrote this story. It was totally an originally different tale. The Shroud was used to teach a certain theosophy. The people of this original religion of the Shroud, their original creator god was Ptolemy, which is clearly a shortening or a lengthening of the word Ptah from Egypt, their creator god. I find this whole story absolutely incredible, and just looking at Simon Bar Giora's searches on YouTube, this story hasn't been told. This is the greatest story never told. Hope you thought this was interesting. You have a nice day.